We are recording. As soon as I'm gone, you can start.
Hello, welcome to Interruptions podcast. We talk to individuals who have dealt with trauma and interruptions in their personal and professional lives and their journey towards being resilient. Kathy and I are very passionate about our faith, social justice, and the effects on our lives. Every episode, we will talk about actionable advice that you can apply today to reinvent yourself and find the courage to have faith in the midst of your interruptions. We are your hosts. My name is the Reverend Odell Montgomery Cooper.
And I am Kathy Patton. Odell, I feel like it's been so long since I've seen you, and it hasn't been that long at all, right?
I know, hasn't.
So today we have Alice Forrester. She is actually the CEO of Clifford Beers. So welcome, Alice.
Hi.
Hey,
Welcome
Alice.
to the Interruptions podcast. It's such a pleasure to meet you. I've done work with the Clifford Beers clinic before, but never had an opportunity to meet you. So I'm really excited about having you on the podcast. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you so much. And I'm honored to be here.
Dog. It's good to see you again. So Alice, our title of this podcast was perfect for you. And it's Does Trauma Have Color or Status? And so we wanted to be able to talk about that today. But before we delve in, Alice, this is your stage where I just give you all the love and thanks. And to publicly let you know that Interruption had over 1,000 views for the week. Kevin still has it posted on our YouTube page, and people are still seeing it. The comments are coming in. The invitations are coming in for me to speak and to be places. So I want to personally thank you. So Kathy, what you don't know is Alice and I serve on a board together,
Okay.
CTVIP. And something inside of me said, just talk to Alice about what you're doing. And she gave me great advice. She said, how can I help you? She gave me advice on creating the budget. She introduced me to Charisse, who is in the theater and who met with me, showed me what to do, how to, because, I didn't know anything about the theater world and still don't, but and they were very helpful in helping me with this budget and coaching me about grant processes. And then we were moving along and everything was fine. And then COVID happens and funding dries up. The stage disappears. I call Alice in a panic. And I can tell you that if it wasn't for, David Adams, who was on 2 weeks ago, and you having your two names on any grant, people listened to me and took me serious because this is not the space that they knew me from. So I was a newbie in this space. And I had people say, what? Alice Forrester is supporting you? David Adams, they already pre-funded you? I said, yes. They said, okay, they're doing good. You says, okay, we're going to fund you. So I just need you to know. They said, and Alice is going to be in the community conversation. I said, yes, she'll be in the community conversation. And I was sitting in Alice's kitchen and we were working on something and I got an email and she said, tell them I'm working with you. And I typed it in and I can tell you, Alice, and then you're helping me with the workbook and phase 2 of this. All I can say is you are one bad mamma jamma, Alice.
Alice, before you respond to Odell, I'm seeing a pattern here with Odell because when David Adams was on, she talked about going over there to eat. And then now when she's introducing you, she's talking about being in your kitchen. So I'm seeing a little pattern here that Odell seems to be in someone's kitchen all the time.
It's her kitchen cabinet. Well, Odell and I happen also to be neighbors, which I think has really added to my life because I don't have much of a life having 3 adopted kids and a full-time job. And so to have Odell say, well, I'm going to walk on over and talk to you is like such a refreshing, wonderful thing that I've never really had in my life. So I'm personally very grateful for her friendship and care. We had a friend had lost her son, and I asked Reverend to come over, and she did the prayer for the group, and it was just beautiful. Really made this mom's experience, and I think your loss of your child, was written into what she was experiencing, and so she talks about it all the time. So it's a back and forth, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
What was compelling about her story to you, Alice?
Well, it's funny because I didn't know Odell's story. So let me talk about what was compelling about Odell. Odell is the board chair of this VIP, Connecticut VIP. And I had never met a board chair more organized and more in charge than ever. I was so impressed by her and intimidated and making sure I was on time. And, she has us like under control here. And so I was very admiring of her, and, both from a professional point of view. And then, it was until about 5 or 6 months that I knew some of Odell's story. She shared some of her story. And aside from, my incredible feelings of sorrow for her experience, the story is one filled with, yes, interruptions, but also with this incredible grace. The work and the people that she draws to her because of the kind of person she is. I think it's an amazing thing to watch. Odell says, yeah, I don't know anything about theater. That doesn't matter. She knows everything about people. And she's very good at asking for what she needs, and she's incredible at doing. Like, I've never met anyone where you're like, oh, I think you should, send out a social media post or whatever. And she's like, okay. And she gets on the cell and she's like, she's already got 2 people and they're already sent it out. It's like, okay, that's done. And so it's been it's been an honor to work with you. And theater is my secret love. I did theater before I became in the mental health field. I worked in a women's performance space in New York for about 10 years and did tons of theater. It was a community theater, but it was, New York City. So it was kind of a edgy performance art, and I miss it every day.
Oh, Alice, I just try to do the best I can because I never want to disappoint all the professionals sitting around the table. You all are currently working and still in your fields, and I'm not. So it's like I need to be on my game. So I try hard. I'm like, I don't want to disappoint you.
Well,
So
I think you have an internal critic much stronger than any of us. And I don't know, Kathy, if you would agree with me, but you're, you have a high level of excellence matched by this incredible sense of community and building community. I don't know if it's because your sorority days or, your work in the church, but it's a great combination. So
well,
I agree.
I'm blessed to have you as a friend and a neighbor and colleague.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. That's great. That's great. Odell is like that. She's very organized. I made the mistake of asking her to teach a Bible class, and I thought it would be interesting because she knows her Bible, and then she takes it extremely serious. And we were getting homework and assignments, and I'm like, but I just wanted to learn about the Bible. I didn't know I was going to get homework and have assignments due. And so, and she will like send you a text and make sure you read this and make it. I'm like, oh my goodness, great. So needless to say, I'm not going to ask her to do that anymore.
And she hasn't.
Well, I think that that perseverance and the word resilience is used way too much, I think, in the field. But I think that determination, perseverance, grit, big brain, I don't know, it just makes things happen, and it's pretty impressive.
Well,
Alice, I'm
go
sorry.
ahead,
Go ahead. No,
Nope.
go ahead. That's okay.
That's your line. You're up. Go ahead.
Alice, you mentioned that you were in the theater, so I'd love to hear about that type of information, because what, of course, many people know of Clifford Beers in the community. And so what I'd like to know from you is because I'm a Google fiend, I will Google anything. I'll Google recipes. I'm Google all the time. What I'd like to know is that what would I not find on Google if I put your name in or Clifford Beers' name in?
What would you not find in?
What would I not find?
Well, if you just put my name in, you may find me attached to the WOW Theater, Women One World Theater. And we actually just had our 30th anniversary a few years ago. And it was we called it a collective anarchy that we started in, as I said, in New York City, and it's still running. And they do probably, well, I don't know now, they're probably not doing any live performance, but they probably did 6 to 8 performances a year. And it was a collective. So I got time on in the stage, which is worth so much money in New York, right? To have that much time.
Yeah.
And if I worked on your show. So it was, this idea of women supporting women to be able to produce their work. And you couldn't just act in my show. You had to take the set down or do the house management or stage management, all the really unfun things.
All of the above, right?
Right. And I'm very proud of that work, and it certainly informed who I am today and as an adult. I grew up in New Jersey, a very lower middle class family. My dad and mom didn't go to college. My dad fixed typewriters. My mom was a secretary. She stayed home. I was one of 5. And, they were not, this was back in the day when there was a career outside of college, and they really didn't want me to go to college. And I was so interested in arts and theater, and we had never, ever gone to the theater as a family ever in our lives, and they were like, who is this person, and I was insistent that I was going to go to college. So, I filled out all the financial aid forms, and they'd stand there in the morning and say, go get a real job. They just, they wanted a real job, was being an assistant, a secretary, or, my mom said, well, maybe you could make a good airline stewardess.
Wow.
Because you like to travel. And, and I, so that I could have done all of those things. But there was just this passion inside of me that just wanted something else. And so I found myself, through a couple of different pathways in New York doing this theater. And it was the first time I lived at home when I went to college. So it was my first time being independent. $5 in your pocket and that's it, kind of thing.
And that was a lot, right?
Yeah, it was a lot, right? And I had a friend who had 5. We had dinner,
right.
Yeah.
Amazing. So, Alice, how do you go from theater in New York to PhD and running a mental health clinic in New Haven?
Yeah. So, a lot of blessings and a lot of serendipity and things that have happened, right? I was up for a big director through the the Dramatists Guild would pick 12 up and coming directors in New York, or from across the country. And they would send them out to community theaters across the country to almost apprentice with directors, famous, artistic directors. And I auditioned, I put my paperwork in, and I got chosen. And
Okay.
it was like unbelievable because I never went to college. I took one theater course my whole life and whatever. And I was really excited because I was going to get placed somewhere in the country, maybe Milwaukee, I don't know, and go do this theater. And they ran out of money and they didn't have enough. And so I got cut right
Oh,
in August, right? I was supposed to in September. I was waiting for my letter where I was going to go, and I didn't get it. And I was literally, everybody always says nah, but I was standing there with the letter, like horrified, that I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I was like packed and ready to go. And this woman came over and she said, "What's wrong?" And she was the mom of one of my kids I was working in a summer camp. And I said, "Oh, I was supposed to do this and I don't know what I want to do with my life. I was in therapy. I like therapy. I like theater. I don't know." And she goes, "Well, I work at NYU and they have this program called drama therapy. Why don't you come over and you could work it for me and, go to this program?" And it turned out that the director of the program was on sabbatical. So she just signed me up. She had turned out she was vice president of NYU. She signed me up. I got a full scholarship. I got a job, more money than I'd ever made, working there. And I joined the drama therapy program. The guy came back in the middle of this, in January, and he said, "Who are you? You're supposed to audition to get in." And I'm like, "Well, I'm a drama therapist and I'm here." And so I started the field of drama therapy, which is a very small field in our country. There are a lot of creative arts therapists, art, music. But I had this incredible opportunity of meeting Dr. David Johnson, who at that time was the head of the National Trauma Center at the West Haven VA. And I did my internship with the VA, and there was no turning back after that. I worked with Vietnam veterans 20, 30 years out of Vietnam. And they had a program where these guys lived together in a cohort, and drama therapy, art therapy was all part of the work. And I learned so much about people, about the country, about trauma, and about the social impact of trauma on people. Here were these guys who were living very broken lives, most of them. They were divorced. They didn't interact with their kids. When they came back from Vietnam, they had to go into the bathroom and change out of their uniform because of the protesters.
Okay.
And they had to live with both having, witnessed so many horrific things and their friends who died, but they also perpetrated, bad things and had nowhere to talk about any of these things.
Wow.
And so the work that we did in the 6-month, 8-month cohort was to bring out the story and help these folks, both men and women, tell their story and listen to story, which was hard to listen to trauma-wise. But it was a life-changing experience for me, and I'm so glad I didn't get that internship. Who wants to do real theater when you can do this kind of theater?
Is drama theater something that you're still involved in? Do you still integrate that process in what you're doing?
Well, I'm a full-time administrator, and so if you want to call it drama, yeah, you can, budgets and grant writing, as you experienced it, through this process. I went back to get my PhD. I was a drama therapist. I worked at St. Raphael's. I ran about 18 to 20 hours a group there on their inpatient unit. Great experience. I did that for a couple of years. Then I went up to Danbury Hospital and worked there. And then I decided that I thought that I could run the place, which was, be careful what you wish for, my friend used to always say. And I said I need my PhD, so I decided to go back and get my PhD in psychology. And I had to leave. In psychology, they kind of kick everything out of you. You have to be a psychologist,
Yeah.
and it took 7 years and a lot of work. And I did the PhD, and then had to get a job as an administrator to pay my student loans. And so there we go. So
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I did do a lot of drama therapy. I trained in New Haven drama therapy, and I did a lot. And I sneak in a few folks every once in a while to be able to do that. But mostly I'm working in home, and there's a lot of drama there.
So, Alice, this is a side of part of your story that I learned on Sunday when you were here. Talk to us about Clifford Beers. You're located in New Haven. You're on Winchester Avenue. For those who are going to watch this show, they will be able to see you on the podcast, but when on Spotify, they can't. But you are a very intelligent white woman. You are the CEO of a mental health facility on Winchester Avenue. Even though Yale renamed it Science Park, it's still Winchester. It is Winchester Avenue. It's a part of New Haven that is a community of color. And you are the CEO there, and you provide services for our community. Can you just talk about what you do? Because, prior to meeting you, there was a perception about your agency that you weren't that the programs and services weren't for the community, that you had to get a doctor's referral in order to be there. And Science Park was Yale, so of course people didn't think people of color worked there. So there's this perception or misperception that people have about your organization. So talk to us about Clifford Beers and what you all really do.
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you for asking. So Clifford Beers is 107 years old. And everyone always goes, well, who's Clifford Beers? So Clifford Beers was a guy who lived in New Haven. He went to Yale, but he was an accounting major who suffered pretty terrible depression. So much so that at the turn of the century, he tried to commit suicide. And he lived on Trumbull Street, and he wrote a book after his experience. And in the book, he said, "I think I held on a little too long, so I only broke my legs." He jumped off the fourth floor of the townhouse, and he had gotten so depressed that he was in a psychosis. And this was in the turn of the century, like 1906, 1907. Well, he was in the hospital, so he was in his legs got better, but they didn't know what to do with him because he was so ill. They put him in Connecticut Valley Hospital, CVH, where where people go. It was an insane asylum, and he went into the insane asylum and was quite just struck by how poorly people were treated, how the insane were locked away from the regular society, and there was no treatment for mental health. So this guy, he was a little probably bipolar, so he had some mania. He was very enthusiastic. He kept writing everything down. And when he came out of the hospital a couple of years later, still with depression, he wrote a book called The Mind That Found Itself. And it was the first book that ever talked about from someone who lived in an insane asylum. And it was sort of, I always call it an Oprah, book club book in Victorian society. And, people read it. And he actually, after he got out, he started the Connecticut Mental Hygiene Society, which then became the National Society. And now is Mental Health America, is the largest mental health advocacy group in the world.
Wow.
Every law, every policy that has passed through for mental health in our state, in our country, and across the world really starts in this association. And so, his vision, Odell, through his distress, right? He created this book, and then this work after the book and change the world. So
Yes.
that's the legacy of this organization. And it was always an organization that helped other organizations form and start across the state and across the country. And then in the 50s, we became a child guidance clinic. Um, and we have served last year well over 6,000 kids and family members in the greater New Haven region. So we do mobile crisis service for 18 towns in the greater New Haven region.
Really?
We have an affiliate. We
Okay.
work with an organization in Norwalk. So in Mid Fairfield, we have an agency that sees about 1,500 kids and families there. Um, we're embedded in New Haven public schools. We run programs for kids who are at high risk, problem sexual behaviors, a lot of trauma, sex trafficking. We have a very extensive expertise in working with kids who have been sexually abused or lived through domestic violence. And we are constantly, like our founder, Clifford Beers, looking at the systems that are in place and trying really hard to meet our families where they're at and address their needs from that place rather than, just being a mental health agency where you, uh, go and just get medicated. We're very interested in helping people access basic needs, resources, food, housing, job, community, connection, mental health support. We have almost half of our staff are people who work in the community and help with basic needs. We had staff out today. The schools gave out food at 3 schools today. And we had about 8 of our staff were out there. And someone wrote me from Martinez, there must have been 500 families waiting for boxes of food in line around the building. And I don't know if they had enough.
Oh my goodness.
So, we work very much in the community trying to address the needs. During COVID, we opened a WarmLine for people in the New Haven community. Actually, now it's statewide. We get half the calls are people looking for resources, but we have a lot of folks who I just wanted to provide a space that a live person answered the phone and, talk to us, talk about your anxiety. And so we've had hundreds of people call, just to talk.
So that's what the warm line is. It's someone can call you. They would call a number. You please give us the number.
Yeah.
And when they call the number, what happens when they call?
If it's during the hours we're open, which is 8 till 7, and on the weekends, I think it's 10 to 6. I have the hours maybe a little wrong. It's called Reach Out CT, and the phone number is 1-844-TALK, the number 4 CT.
Okay.
So it's Talk 4 CT, and we are. So the agency, I worked at the hospital, I worked in Danbury. And when I came to Clifford Beers, I was like amazed that this place, we're all pressured in the business of mental health to just in and out, in and out, in and out. And to have a place that actually was looking at not only what does the child need, but what the whole family needs, but then what the community needs, has been like an amazing experience for me to work in a place that actually wants to create change.
Which is unique and good.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have about 200 staff, a very diverse staff. I know I'm a white woman and I'm the CEO. I always like to say, though, I'm a lesbian. So there's one class of identification, if you will, in terms of, having a little bit of a difference. But I'm raising 3 children of African American descent. And we are, as an agency, committed to a very diverse workforce. And we have increased our hiring, by 37, almost 40% in terms of more folks from the community. So we're working really hard to not just be seen as a old white institution, but as a community partner. And we do that. We have a big building on 93 Edward Street, which I don't know if you've ever seen, Odell.
I've never seen that building. No.
It's a big old pink building, looks like a kid's place. It's that's our main office. My business offices and care coordination are on Winchester Avenue. We have an office in West Haven and an office in Guilford. And we're embedded in 12 schools. And we work very closely with New Haven Public Schools.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Alice, I don't know if you knew that the title of our podcast tonight was, Does Trauma Have Color or Status? You've worked in very diverse communities. You talked about working with the vets. So you worked in diverse communities economically, ethnically, and situationally. I know that I'm going to ask you, because I really want to hear about the work that you did with Sandy Hook, but can you, based on your work and based on everything that you've done in the community, would you say that trauma has a color or status?
You know, so answering that question is difficult in some ways. So people in our community in Greater New Haven have very high exposure to trauma and adversity. We find an average of 8 to 11 adverse experiences, not like, you know, it could be in a category, interpersonal violence, it could be community violence, it could be parental abandonment, parental substance use. You know, we have a long list of, they call them adverse childhood experiences. And we're in the schools and we're helping across the state, actually. And we're finding in the urban communities that New Haven, Bridgeport, and even in other, you know, Stamford and Norwalk, that our kids are having very high exposure to adversity.
Wow. I'm not surprised.
Is there a color? Well, racism and structural racism is an adversity number one. So, you know, there's that as a as a reality, no matter how affluent or poor you are. You know, we live in a country where structural racism affects multiple times a day people, in terms of your feelings of safety in the community, you know, sending your kids out. I have a daughter, 22, loves to ride around town, and, you know, I'm worried constantly about her safety. But status, I'd like to know what you mean by status before I answer that question. Like, what do you mean?
Well, when Kathy and I were putting this together and we were looking at resources, part of what I did with part of the struggle that I know that we have in urban communities and communities of color are resources. You know, there isn't a doctor on every corner. Our friends, doctors don't come to dinner, you know, and can help counsel our children, look at our children, and we go golfing and get resources and know a doctor. And these resources of where to find support and help aren't as readily available as you would see if I was in Greenwich or in Sandy Hook. So when we talk about status, part of the struggles and I'll say in our community is resources. And, you know, a child in New Haven will go to school, and then on Friday, their friend could be shot dead. Monday, they are expected to return to school and act like everything is okay and everything is normal, when the entire city's been disrupted and everything is not okay. And this person has been traumatized.
Right.
And it's treated very differently status wise. If someone lost a friend or a major shooting in Cross, then it would happen in Greenwich or something. You would hear that, counselors went into the schools to talk to the classroom. You don't hear that in New Haven. So that was some of the concerns that we had about status.
Yeah.
That's what we mean about status.
Yeah. I think you're right on. The what we do to our kids who live with so much trauma is we arrest them, or they're suspended, or they're disciplined because they're not following direction. And what we've been trying to do across the state, but in particular in our cities, is really educate how much stress our children and families are living with. And you
Thank you.
expect the families, you expect the family to get the kid there on school when mom's worked 2.5 jobs.
That's right.
No car, he missed the bus. How to, the enormity of expectations we have are so high. And I'm not saying expectations shouldn't be high, but what I'm saying is our tolerance for distress or adversity is very low. And so, we want people to do what they're supposed to do. And,
Yes.
he shouldn't be asleep on the desk, and how, and our schools don't have the woman power or the resources to be able to address, in a whole way, what this family and what this child needs. Because one of the things we've learned and know very strongly, that it's not just the kid. A lot of times it's the kid gets identified, but it's really the family that needs support.
Right.
Yes.
A kid comes in and he, she's been suspended 3 times in kindergarten and is going, repeating again. And the reality is that, the long list of things that are going on with that family, the kid's absenteeism is like really low compared to they're going to be evicted, or mom's eviction, or, the other brothers and sisters are being arrested. So like, there's just so much chaos, and the resources to address it is very low. And the will to address it, I'm not saying is low, but if you were to look at how does structural racism work, right? It starts with, let's just ignore those problems. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and get a job or whatever, and
or go back to work and keep going and hide it. Don't talk about it.
Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. That's right. Keep it in your household.
And that was what, when I shared with you the script, when you saw it for the first time, I remember you saying that you were proud that I was transparent and willing to tell the truth. That, we're taught at a young age to not talk about it, to, pray more, and to just keep going, return to work, and keep yourself busy, but it doesn't help.
And the biology of trauma is so real, and we don't, that's one of the first things we do when we're trying to teach teachers or other professionals around the impact of trauma. It impacts your brain. I know, Adele, you had a specific impact on your brain. We can't say one caused the other, but one impacted the other, I'm sure, very strongly.
Very strongly. Stress, definitely.
Yeah. And we see it in poor health outcomes, right? In lower economic in our Black and brown communities. And we're hearing it now with COVID. And, people are asking why. And, they don't understand, what stress causes so much inflammation, and inflammation causes illness. And the biology, I have a friend who teaches this, and I think it's just such a wonderful way to frame it, right? You're born into a world. It's either a safe world or an unsafe world, right? I mean, that's just you didn't ask, this is what you're born into. And in either world, your brain is accommodating those, in order to survive. So
Yes.
in an unsafe world, you become hypervigilant. You're really listening, making sure you're able to respond immediately. And in a safe world, you're able to kind of relax, but you do really bad under a lot of stress, right? It's like you're not
Mm-hmm.
brought up for that. And I think that it's it's important for us to realize what those environments do to the biology of our kids and our of us.
Yes. Yes.
And early
Absolutely.
childhood intervention, start earlier and quicker, and help the mom or dad, get good employment, have safe housing, have enough food. I mean, for goodness sake, the privilege I have, my kids have, they tell me they have to have brand new sneakers when they start school in September. Even in virtual school, they have to have,
In virtual
new
school.
sneakers. The,
There
the,
are, part of, as you were talking about it, I was doing some reading, being home. It's like, what am I going to do? So I just read as much as I can. And, Dr. Joy DeGruy, who you know of, she talks about the post-traumatic slave syndrome
yeah.
that's in our DNA and our genetics. And we build into our culture that we pass down in terms of, our bodies automatically respond. People of color respond very differently when a police pull up behind us and stop us versus someone of, who's white.
Yeah.
Our behavior, the actions are very different. When
Right.
you go into the store, our behaviors are just different. So you're absolutely correct. And it's something that unconsciously we teach. And as I was working on interruptions, I kept wondering, why was I so protective of my children? My son, be safe, go to New York, have a better life. That's that slave syndrome mentality where you're going to go up north and stay with your family so you can have better options.
That's right.
Even though it was south, the concept was
Mhm.
still there.
Yeah.
And I had friends who listened to Kathy and I's previous podcast that said, we never paid attention to Jackie.
Mhm.
We was just focused on you. We never realized what she went through. And when they saw the entire production, they felt bad
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we focus on the adult and we
Mhm.
forget the impact that it has on the community, our friends, our family.
Mhm.
Kathy and I go to the same church, and I remember in interruptions, there was a saying that says, ask me another question. People were calling with all these silly questions. How you feeling? God needed another angel. Kathy's daughter is autistic, and she said the most honest, profound thing to me. Miss Odell, I'm so sorry to hear that your son Jonathan was murdered. And that's what she said. But she said it to me every time she saw me. So it was like, okay, but she didn't, she said, I'm sorry. Never said, how are you feeling? How are you doing? But she said, I'm sorry that this was happening to you. She named it, she claimed it. And Kathy, for you, we do talk about interruptions and communication. How did you have to talk to your daughter about about my son being murdered in grief? Because it's not anything that we do.
Right.
It's not it's not our comfort level to talk about grief and death.
So, and you're right. We always try to soften the blow by saying exactly what you said. God needed another angel, or now they're not sick anymore. But in our household, it's a little bit different because when you have a child with special needs, our conversations sound very different. You have to be very direct when you're having these type of conversations with everyone in the household, not just her. And so when I explained death to her at a very young age, she lost her grandfather and her grandmother, who were icons in her world. They were our support system, and she lost them 9 months apart. And so I had to have a very honest conversation about death, with her to say that this is what happened. They were ill. She knew that they were in the hospital. Because my husband worked at night, I would often have to take her one way or the other, either to the hospital with me, or when my mother was being cared for at home, to take her to with me to care for my mother at her home. And so she saw these up front. So she had that very honest view. So she heard me being honest. And so when she was having that conversation with you to say, I'm sorry, to say about your son's death. And so that's what she heard in our household. I couldn't cushion it for her because otherwise it wouldn't be real. I had to make it real for her. And I think not in a harsh way that you and I would have a conversation, but very real for her. Even when we would go into, I don't know if you've ever noticed that when someone in a wheelchair or someone that's physically disabled might walk by people, they're not comfortable looking at them. And she always was. And so that made me recognize that I was the one not comfortable. And I had to deal with that. And so looking through her eyes and being honest, I had to learn honesty myself. And so now rather than turn away from someone, you say hi or you recognize them. And she would, like she did with you, she would go directly up to them and just, directly and just talk to them. Always. Now, what I did have to talk to her about was limitations, but it's hard for a child with autism to understand, but she understands it's repetition in terms of having direct conversations to say, it's okay that you said you were sorry. And now she understands that, but we're not going to say it every time we see her. So not chastising her, but just to sit down so that she would understand it.
That was
great story.
Yeah. So Alice, in the Black community, Black Panther came out, and we took our kids and grandchildren, nieces, nephews, everybody to see Black Panther to just show them that
multiple times,
and we would drag kids just so we could go see it again.
Yeah. I'm the same.
And we wanted to show, the heritage, the richness, the intelligence of our culture that wasn't taught in schools. That this is Africa, this is history, this is who we were, and kids were, this, and and we taught this. So the character, Boswick dies, and all of a sudden I'm listening to parents with, Black Lives Matter, the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. They're hearing it. We're stuck in the house, so we have no other venue but to show it on the news, talk about it, shows up on social media. Our children, I'm hearing a lot of my friends say that their children are having nightmares. My grandchild says, I'm having a nightmare. I think I'm going to be homeless, or someone's going to hurt us. And it's not anything that it's not hasn't been comfortable for us to talk about grief and trauma. You've worked with Sandy Hook, you've worked with youth and kids. How would you advise us? Because we know grief has no color, pain is pain. But how would you advise our listeners, us, to talk to our children about the trauma that they're seeing and the grief? Because as you say, it's showing up in schools.
That's the school calling now, actually.
Do you have to take
a robocall?
That?
No. It's just I heard your phone ringing and my phone.
Yeah, same thing.
In public schools, yeah.
Yes.
So, Kathy, I thought what you said about your daughter was really incredible, because of her other ability, right? You have to talk to her in real terms and tell her for real what is going on, so that she can fully understand it, as opposed to our metaphors and ways that we kind of talk around stuff, right? And so I think and also her seeing truth much clearer than we do, right? In terms of like you said, seeing folks in distress, or in a wheelchair or whatever, and her not making a judgment that we might do, she treats everyone, the same. So there's a lot of very important things we can learn from her and for folks who raise children with other abilities,
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, it's very hard right now to, to say, oh, this too will pass. I mean, it
Yes.
feels, it feels like the real has hit us in the face and on the everywhere. Like, the reality of George Floyd's death, what happened yesterday with Breonna, coming out clear that Breonna Taylor's case was not presented in the way that everybody thought it would be. With the loss of Jonathan, we we're getting like it is clearly real right now. And so that our kids are feeling it, and they're feeling the distress, they're feeling scared. They're worried, about this mysterious COVID, which, either impacts their life or
Yes.
not, but they're here, it's impacting their life every day because they can't go to school. So the best approach is Kathy's approach, which is to be as real, and Odell, you have a little granddaughter too. It's sort of like, you tell her what you can, and you tell her as real as you can in in words that she can understand. Um, I was talking to Odell the other day, and the thing that we have to not rush to is judgment that this is trauma, like they're going to be damaged for life, right?
Yes.
Them having strong feelings is a very important and good thing, and to support them of that. And when what you want to watch for as a parent is their does it not go away? Does it not lose, lessen? Does um, are her nightmares getting worse? You know, are they? Is this something that really preoccupying her during the day? Is she not able to really do the normal activities of life that she would normally do? Is there interference there? Sleep is a very good indicator, right? Is she able to go to sleep? There are always changes in kids, especially when bad things happen, but it's important to recognize that that's just a natural process, like all of us.
Okay. Yes. Very.
Um,
That it is.
but I think that the thing that we don't do well is talking real. you know I mean, you think about the Vietnam veterans. You talk about the work that's been done in terms of 400 years of a country ignoring what we've
Mm,
done, right?
yes.
um Sexual abuse, that happens to be where I'm an expert. Well, when you write a dissertation, I guess you could say I have a little bit of expertise in that area, but I did my research on talking about that, and how I listened to girls tell their stories of how they told. And, the literature back in the day when I wrote my dissertation was really focused on it being in the individual person, that their
Mm,
memory might be, that their memory might be faulty, or
mhm.
they were hesitant to tell, or they didn't have a memory, like it was repressed. Like all
Right.
of this intrapsychic individual sort of focus in the literature was all about that. And I had the opportunity of working with folks who had studied storytelling of the Holocaust, Dr. Dory Laub from Yale, and how they started to get people in their 80s and 90s to tell the stories of what happened, because again, they lived their whole life never talking about what happened, right?
Was it
And
helpful for them after all these years to
yes,
finally tell it?
yeah, I mean, the reality is, Odell, what you achieved in Interruptions is what we want everyone to be able to achieve, which is
Hmm.
to live and tell the story so that you're not holding it all by yourself. And you did an amazing thing, because you told your story, you told Jackie's story, you told your nephew story. You told other people's stories too, with their permission, which was amazing. And that is really what you want to get to in trauma is let's talk about this. My
Okay.
sister-in-law passed away very suddenly, and they live in New Jersey. My brother and his two kids, and you know, it was amazing. The community showed up at their doorstep. Food forever, you know. I always say, you know, you bring a lasagna, right? You come with to support. There are no words. I love your thing. Ask me another question. But when we have kids who die in our community, the lasagnas don't come, right? I mean, the families are often, if they're involved in violence or you know, drugs or whatever, you know, those families have to live all by themselves in that shame, in that story, without having this community support. And
That's the hard part. And now we don't want to end this on
okay.
a heavy note, and love you, appreciate this conversation. What do you do to not carry this to sleep so that you're not having nightmares and can go to sleep? What do you do for you, Alice, that helps you to just let it go?
Well, I have a lot of nightmares. I think we all are. They
Yeah.
say COVID has brought us all into this dream state. So I can't get rid of those too much. But I I try to keep my workday, you know, to a beginning and an end, right?
Good. Right.
Because even though I'm working from home, if you can't tell, I'm stuck in this little closet, you know.
All of us, right?
But you know, I often actually go into the kitchen to wash the dish. I love washing the dishes with the hot water as a cleansing thing. And I listen to podcasts, which I love. So go podcast. And I read a lot. I like to I paint. I haven't painted actually in a long time.
Really?
Yeah, I like
Okay.
to paint furniture. But I try to make sure that I have some boundaries, you know, around work and home. And if you can hear, I don't know if you can hear, my son is snoring behind me.
No.
He fell asleep. He always he gets hungry and then he falls asleep, and he's sound asleep in his bed. And I had to wake him up. I ordered dinner tonight, so
No, it's important for us to take care of ourselves.
yeah.
There was just days where I would just go to Kathy's house and just, you know, cry. And now I just go and I sit. I remember going to her house. She had a holiday party and I showed up and I was like, great, I can't drive home. So she was like, what do you want to drink? I said, can I have some wine? She was like, no. You know, you can have some juice, you know, but the support there was,
Yeah.
I can go to her house, I can sit on her deck, I can get away from the environment. And it's something that we all need to do, is to, you know, safely find some place that we can just go and sit. And you and I sat Sunday and it was like, oh, this is nice,
Yeah.
you know, just
Yeah.
to be away from our environment. Is there, in our last couple of minutes, is there anything else you want our listeners to know about Clifford Beers, how to access you? You know, why would they want to call the Warm Line? And, you know, what would you want to tell people in the last couple of minutes about Clifford Beers? And in case you're sitting there thinking, I don't know where to go.
So first of all, Clifford Beers is open. We have open access. We have emergency mobile services. So if you have an emergency, you could call 211 and we would come out within 30 minutes, even 20 minutes, to someone's home to help with the child, you know, anything going on. We take intakes for parents or for kids. And we're very open, and they could call our main number, which is on the website, cliffordbeers.org. I guess the last word that I'd like to say is it's exhibited in your relationship with Kathy, that you don't have to be alone with the struggle, that it is in friendship and in community that we do our healing. And that's what we look for in Clifford Beers. That's what we try to promote and help build a community so that you don't feel alone.
That's great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Alice, what Odell and I do is try to expose that a life interruption can, in fact, cause trauma that can temporarily or permanently alter a person's ability to function. We know that in too many communities, while resources may be available, we fail to collaborate to ensure equitable distribution of services. Programs and agencies such as yours are underutilized because sometimes of fear or lack of trust, or failure to share information about services available and access to services. So I just want to thank you for coming and sharing with us today, because we hope by your words with us today that someone will be encouraged not to be alone, as you said, and reach out for support. And then for our listeners, we're going to say, please don't forget to click our like button on our podcast and subscribe to our site. If you're listening through podcasts, download and share, because someone you know may need to hear this.
Yes. Yes. So thank you again, Alice, for being on the team and being here with us. And Kathy, another interesting podcast. I'm starting to love these, and I never thought I'd enjoy podcasts.
Because you're buying all this equipment, you're having a lot of fun, I think.
Yes, I am. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at Clifford Beers.
Thank you. Okay. And we smile, and Kevin turns.